In this module, we will be learning all aspects of employment applications. Please click Next to continue. Learning objectives. Introduction to job applications. Application basics. Types of applications. Application glossary. Completing a sample job application. Understanding terms on applications. Job application tips. Obtaining letter of reference. Pre-employment tests. Addressing criminal background issues. Finding prior employers. Calling after you have sent in an application. How to fill out an application. It is important that you read the entire application form before you start filling it out. Read the instructions carefully and follow them exactly. Completing the application properly is very important because the application is your first chance to present your skills to the employer. First impressions are important. Your appearance is important. Even when submitting an application, every time you make eye contact with an employer, dress as though you are ready to go to work. The employer may have a job that needs to be filled and wants to interview you immediately. Apply for a specific position rather than entering anything or open for the desired position. Leave no blanks. Write does not apply or N/A for not applicable in the space if the question does not apply to you. Explain lengthy gaps in your work history, for example, attending school. Read and check the applications for completeness before turning it in to the employer. Be sure to sign and date the application. Mail or turn the application into the correct person or place. Greet the receptionist politely when requesting or submitting an application. The receptionist's first impression are often passed along. Be honest in your answers. Use blue or black ink pens. Erasable pens are also helpful. Have all the information on hand that you might need to fill out an application, such as a fact sheet with the names and telephone numbers of your references and past employers. Print clearly and legibly. Fill out the form neatly and accurately. Employers review the information on job applications when deciding who to schedule for job interviews. Remember that employers often judge the appearance of an application as a clue to how much importance you put on the quality of your work. Employment applications request a wide variety of personal information ranging from your Social Security number for employment tax purposes to questions about your personal hobbies and interests. The following list on the left provides examples of how to complete the most typical information requested on job applications. Name field. In the name field, be sure to note in what order the employer wants your first and last names. Print neatly. If you have previously applied for a job with an employer, make sure that any name changes on the application is noted. Address. Use an address where you can receive mail. You may also be asked how long you've lived at your current address. Telephone number. Provide your telephone number with an area code. If you use a message number, make sure that everyone at that number knows what to say for you or that the message on the machine is appropriate. For a business number, include an extension number if one is available. Health requirements. Be sure that you meet the health requirements for the job. If a physical examination is a condition of employment, the employer must pay for it and can only request it after you are hired. School attended. All applications ask for information about the schools you've attended. Usually, you will need to list the city and state where the school was located and any degrees earned. List your education, detailing any special courses. Be prepared to provide transcripts if requested. Click on the menu to the left to learn how to fill out an application properly. Always fill in the space for the position desired. Never write any or will do anything. A vague answer makes it difficult for the employer to visualize how your special skills will meet their company needs. It is acceptable to list more than one position, but do some research first so you know job titles used at the company. Salary. In the salary desired field, write open or negotiate. Rather than putting in a salary figure that might be too high or too low, the employer will look at the salaries paid previously. Availability field. In the availability field, write immediately. If you are available to start right away. If you are currently employed, indicate that you are available to start after giving 2 weeks' notice. Giving 2 weeks' notice makes it more likely that you will get a good reference from the employer. Be knowledgeable about the hours required for the job. New employees rarely have a choice about the hours and shifts available. Professional certifications. If you have any professional certifications, licenses, or registrations, list them. For example, you may be a licensed cosmetologist, dental hygienist, or have a special class driver's license. Hobbies. List any hobbies or interests you may have. This will provide the employer with additional information about related skills. Click on the menu to the left to learn more about how to fill out an application properly. Avoid school graduation dates. If possible, avoid entering birth dates or school graduation dates on an application. Misdemeanor. Some applications request information about prior misdemeanors or felony convictions. Read the application questions carefully and answer truthfully, adding, "We'll discuss at interview." You can be fired for not telling the truth on an application. Click on the menu to the left to learn more about how to fill out an application properly. Don't overlap job experience dates. Under work experience, the application form usually asks for your job title and dates of employment, the name, address, and phone number of the employer, and a description of your duties. Some applications also ask for your salary and your supervisor's name. Include part-time and full-time jobs. Make sure that the dates of employment don't overlap or conflict. Positive phrasing. If asked for the reason you left a job, use positive phrasing like to take a job with more responsibility, moved, seasonal, business closed, job or contract ended, temporary work, laid off, reorganization, return to school, or career change. Avoid negative words like fired, quit, absentee, or tardiness. Activities, volunteer works. Employers are often interested in what you do outside of work because it reflects your interests and abilities. Highlight any clubs, activities, or volunteer work or organizations you belong to that may relate to the job you are seeking. Special skills. List any special skills, abilities, experience, and/or training that related to the position you want. If you were in the military service, emphasize the duties you performed that related to the job for which you are applying. Have all appropriate forms available, such as certificates. References. Always talk to your references before beginning your work search to ask permission to use their name, addresses, and phone numbers on your applications. Former employers, business acquaintances, teachers, and the clergy of all acceptable references. Be sure to keep your reference list up to date and let them know when you find a job. Mistakes to avoid. Some of the most common mistakes that job seekers make on applications are not following directions, misspelled words, crossed out writing, not printed, wrinkly or messy application form, incomplete information or unanswered questions, not applying for a specific position, incomplete work history or large unexplained gaps in work history, overlapping or conflicting employment dates with no explanation, application not turned in by deadline, use of troublesome words such as quit or fired, forgetting to sign the application. Fact sheet. Employment history includes company names, addresses, telephone numbers, and dates of employment. Volunteer work history with community organizations, including organization names, addresses, telephone numbers, and dates of service. Personal references, including names and addresses and telephone number. Personal information such as education and your social security number. Your fact sheet is a useful tool for you, but remember not to turn it in to an employer. Keep your fact sheet up to date for future job searches. Most employers issue their own pre-printed company applications to job seekers. Therefore, job application styles will vary widely from company to company. It is a good idea to prepare a fact sheet with all of your personal information before beginning your job search. Take your fact sheet with you when searching for work. That way, if an employer asks you to fill out an application, you will have your information readily available to complete an application. Having your fact sheet on hand will save you time and help you prevent errors. Always use black or blue ink to complete an application for a job. Do not fill out application forms with a pencil. A pencil smudges, fades, and smears. Ink is easier to read. Check directions carefully. Does the application ask you to print, or does it ask you to write? Be sure to follow these instructions. Read all instructions before you begin to fill out the application. Give honest and complete answers to all questions. Remember to bring everything with you that you will need when filling out applications. It does not create a business-like impression when a job seeker needs to borrow the employer's pen or telephone book to complete an application. Be organized. Bring the following items with you when you think you might be completing applications: ballpoint pens, black or blue ink, your fact sheet, copies of your resume. Your completed application is a reflection of you. Make it a good one.
Sylvia, I had a bad experience trying to get a job at the drugstore earlier, but I don't know what I did wrong.
What happened, Gustav?
I went to fill out an application, and I thought I filled it out well, but when I was done, the manager said there was no way she would hire me.
Well, did you change clothes?
No, why would I do that? It's hot.
You're wearing shorts, sandals, and a tank top. That certainly wasn't a good first impression.
First impressions matter when you're just filling out an application?
Yes, they do. You need to be wearing proper attire and bring what you need to fill out the application.
Like what?
Ballpoint pens, your fact sheet, and copies of your resume would be a good start. It doesn't go over well with prospective employers if you have to ask for pens, a phone book, or other supplies.
Then what else should I do before filling out the application?
Before you fill it out, read the whole thing, paying close attention to the instructions. Employers judge the appearance of an application just as much as the appearance of the applicant.
What about actually filling out the application? Do you have any general tips?
Sure. Greet whomever you meet politely. Be honest in your answers. Use blue or black ink, and if you're worried about mistakes, use erasable ink. Print cleanly, neatly, and legibly. Fill out the whole form unless otherwise instructed. If a question doesn't apply, write "does not apply" or "NA." Don't leave it blank.
And when I think I'm done?
When you think you're done, you're not. Make sure you've signed the application, used the correct date, and answered every question correctly. Read it over completely. Use the fact sheet to double-check the details if necessary. Finally, turn it in to the correct person or place. Nothing's worse than handing your carefully completed application to the wrong person, only to have it discarded.
Wait, let's go back for a second. Some of the fields on the application are really vague and confusing. How can I do it right if I don't know what they're asking for?
Good point. We'll start with the name field. Pay attention to the order the employer wants your name written, and if you've worked there before, be sure to note any corrections to your name.
What about the contact information?
Use an address where you can receive mail. You may be asked how long you've lived at your current address. Provide your telephone number with area code. If using a message number, make sure everyone at that number knows what to say for you and that any automated greetings are appropriate and professional.
What if they ask if I have any physical conditions that prevent me from doing the job?
Be honest. If an examination is required as a condition of employment, the employer must pay for it and can only request it after you are hired.
How should I fill in information about my education?
Usually, you will need to list the city and state where the school is located, along with any degrees earned. Detail special courses if applicable, and be prepared to provide transcripts if requested. If you have any special certifications or licenses, list them too. Unless specifically asked, don't list your birth date or graduation dates on the application.
For position desired, I'm flexible. Is that okay?
Actually, that's a bad idea. A vague answer makes it difficult for the employer to visualize how your special skills will meet their company needs. It is acceptable to list more than one position, but do some research first so you know job titles used at the company.
What should I put for hobbies and interests?
Pick something that's related to the skills you'll need on the job, but don't lie. Hobbies and interests that imply related skills show an employer how you'd be a better candidate.
I was arrested last year. Do I have to put that on the application?
Read the application questions carefully and answer truthfully, adding, "We'll discuss at interview." You can be fired for not telling the truth on an application.
How much money should I ask for on the application?
In the salary desired field, write "open" or "negotiable" rather than putting in a salary figure that might be too high or too low. The employer will look at the salaries paid previously. If you have to put in a specific value, write the average going rate for this particular job in your field of expertise.
How about availability? I'd like to take a few weeks off before starting a new job.
Write immediately if you are available to start right away. If you are currently employed, indicate that you are available to start after giving 2 weeks' notice. Giving 2 weeks' notice makes it more likely that you will get a good reference from the employer. Be knowledgeable about the hours required for the job. New employees rarely have a choice about the hours and shifts available.
What should I know about the work or job experience portion of the application?
Under work experience, the application form usually asks for your job title and the dates of employment, the name, address, and phone number of the employer, and a description of your duties. Some applications also ask for your salary and your supervisor's name. Include part-time and full-time jobs, including relevant volunteer experience. Make sure that the dates of employment don't overlap or conflict.
How should I answer why I was asked to leave a job?
Use positive phrases like to take a job with more responsibility, moved, seasonal, business closed, job or contract ended, temporary work, laid off, reorganization, return to school, or career change. Avoid negative words like fired, quit, absenteeism, or tardiness.
What if there is a field for additional qualifications or special skills?
List any special skills, abilities, experience, and/or training that relate to the position you want. If you were in the military service, emphasize the duties you performed that relate to the job for which you are applying. Have all appropriate forms available, such as certificates or certifications.
What about references? I had a really good boss 3 years ago, but haven't talked to him in forever.
Always talk to your references before beginning your work search to ask permission to use their names, addresses, and phone numbers on your applications. Former employers, business acquaintances, teachers, and the clergy are all acceptable references. Be sure to keep your reference list updated and let them know when you find a job.
That's good to know. Then what should I avoid when doing applications?
Beware of the following mistakes: not following directions, misspelled words, crossed out writing, using cursive instead of print, wrinkled or messy paper, incomplete information, or unanswered questions, not applying for a specific position, incomplete work history or unexplained gaps in employment, not submitting an application by the deadline, use of troublesome words like bad or fired, and forgetting to sign the application.
You mentioned a fact sheet earlier. What were you talking about?
Most employers use their own pre-printed company application to job seekers. Therefore, job application styles will vary widely from company to company. You should take a fact sheet with all of your personal information with you when searching for work. That way, if an employer asks you to fill out an application, you will have your information readily available to complete their application.
What should I write on my fact sheet?
Prepare your fact sheet with the following information: employment history including company names, addresses, telephone numbers, and dates of employment, volunteer work history with community organizations including organization names, addresses, telephone numbers, and dates of service, personal references including names, addresses, and telephone numbers, personal information such as education and social security number. Your fact sheet is a useful tool for you, but remember not to turn it in to an employer and keep it up to date for future job searches.
Always use black or blue ink to complete an application for a job. Do not fill out application forms with pencil. A pencil smudges, fades, and smears. Ink is easier to read. Check directions carefully. Does the application ask you to write or does it ask you to print? Be sure to follow these instructions. Read all instructions before you begin to fill out the application. Give honest and complete answers to all questions. Answer all questions that apply to you. Do not leave blank spaces. If a question does not apply to you, write NA for not applicable. Spelling must be correct. Be very careful and be sure you know how to spell the words connected to your type of work. If you can do it, you should be able to spell it. List the specific position or occupational areas for which you are applying. Generally, employers react negatively to anything when written in the space reserved for the name of a job or occupation.
Thanks for the helpful information on job applications, Sandra. Are there any other tips you can share with me?
Yes, make sure you never use a pencil because it smudges, fades, and smears. Also, pay very close attention to your spelling.
But what if my spelling is not so good? I don't want to be embarrassed and look up the spelling of words while completing an application on site.
If possible, take the application home with you so you won't be rushed while completing it, and you can look up spellings to certain words. Ask for a second copy of an application in case you have to make many corrections on the first one.
There are usually some questions that I'm not really comfortable answering. Do I have to answer those questions?
Some applications may contain questions that are tricky or even illegal. These may include questions about age, sex, disabilities, health, marital status, children, race, and criminal convictions. It is up to you how to respond to those questions. Generally, if the question does not raise a problem, answer it. If it does, you may want to use NA or a dash. But beware, you may be screened out by too many non-responses.
Thanks again, Sandra, for all of your help.
No problem, Gary. Just to recap, don't misspell words, cross out writing, leave unanswered questions, wrinkle or fold the application, turn it in late, or mention personal, health, legal, or financial problems. Make sure you are accurate, informative, honest, and it is fully completed, neat, signed, and consistent with your resume.
Reminders. Filling out an application. Click each sticky note to learn more. Changing a job. When stating that you left a job, avoid terms like fired, quit, illnesses, or personal reasons. Such terms may screen you out for the job. Indicate that it was time to move on. If you responded with, "I would like to explain at the interview," you very well likely will be called upon to do so. Look for positive statements about why you left a job, such as looking for more responsibility or seeking a more challenging position. Proofreading. If possible, take the application home so you won't be rushed while completing it. This is especially helpful if you have trouble with spelling and grammar. It gives you the opportunity to seek help. Use an erasable pen or keep handy a bottle of correction fluid for fixing errors. Write out responses on a separate sheet of paper or on a second copy of the application before writing it on the final application. Double check grammar, spelling, and content. Status. Some applications may contain questions that are tricky or even illegal. These may include questions about age, sex, disability, health, marital status, children, race, and criminal convictions. It is up to you how you respond to these questions. Generally, if the question does not raise a problem, answer it. If it does, you may want to use NA or a dash. But beware, you may be screened out by too many non-responses. Salary. Salary should usually be discussed in a personal interview with a prospective employer. For this reason, it is probably best to write open or negotiable in the spaces which request the salary you expect to earn. If you put down too high a salary, you might hurt your chances for a personal interview and a job. References are an important part of your job search, so choose them carefully. Do not just look for someone who is influential in the community, but someone who can honestly talk about your qualifications. Before you use someone as a reference, be sure to talk to them about your job search and get their permission. There are 4 kinds of references. Click on the tabs to find out more. Employment references are former employers or direct supervisors. Professional references are people who worked with you or know you in your work environment. Academic references are teachers and others who can talk about your school accomplishments. Personal references are people who only know you socially. The employment or professional references are the most valuable because they can discuss your qualifications. Common mistakes. Don't misspell words, cross out writing, leave unanswered questions, writing or fold the application, turn the application in late, mention health, professional, legal, or financial problems. Suggestions. Do. Be accurate. Be informative. Be complete. Be honest. Print neatly. Sign the application. Keep your application consistent with your resume. Make sure all dates, names, titles, etc. on your application coincide with the information on your resume. Obtaining letters of reference. As a job seeker, one of your most important assets is your stock of professional references. Both letters and phone recommendations can evaluate a good candidate to a top choice and drop a good candidate down to a no longer considered pile. It is important that you manage your recommendations carefully to leverage them in the best possible way. Please click on the numbers below to learn more about obtaining letters of references. Personal reference. The most important thing is to ask people who have good things to say about you to be your references. This advice seems to be obvious, yet it can't count the number of times that I have checked references and gotten mixed reviews. When you ask for references, I recommend doing so via an indirect method, such as email. Indirect approaches allow a recommender to decline much more easily than a direct approach. Reference of great quality. Again, you want a good reference, so if you are not sure if you will get one, give the recommender an out by phrasing your inquiry this way. Bridget, I plan to begin a quiet job search in the next 2 weeks. Do you feel you know me well enough to provide a reference about my leadership, basketball, conflict, management, accounting skills? If the recommender declines, don't be angry, be thankful. Unless the reference is glowing, you don't want it. Even a lukewarm or I don't really know her very well reference can be damaging. Collection of letters of references. Collect letters of recommendation from colleagues and supervisors at every position. Today's job market goes quickly, and a fast search timeline may make it difficult to secure letters of recommendation. Avoid this scenario by asking for letters of recommendation for your file. Ask 2 weeks before you leave a position, but after you have given your notice. Ask for a letter that you can keep on file for any future job searches, grant applications, or fellowships. If you are consistent, you will have a number of recommendations ready to go at any time they are needed. Don't just ask supervisors for recommendations, however. Think of colleagues you've worked well with. And, if possible, try to get a letter from someone who has worked for you. Purpose of reference letters. It's okay to be directive with your referencees. Nicely, of course. Assign each a role. Amy, I'd like your reference to focus on my leadership skills. Kathy, please focus your discussion on how well I work in teams. Ms. Sizemore, can you emphasize my ability to work on short deadlines? In this way, your recommendations can be tailored not only toward the type of work you did with the referee, but the skills that stood out the most. Communication with your references. Keep in touch with your references. As you progress in your job search, keep your references up to date. It is always helpful for them to have a copy of the job description and company. Make them aware that they may be called and give a time frame for contact. You may also want to give your reference some direction at this time. For example, during the interview, the director of HR, Ms. Gutman, kept asking me questions about my ability to prioritize tasks. I get the feeling the skill is a big deal for them. When you talk to her, can you work that in? Communication with your references. As important as keeping your references up to date during the search, it is of importance to thank them afterwards as well. Regardless of the outcome of the search, let your references know what happened and be sure to extend your thanks for their efforts, particularly if they had to produce a letter quickly for you. Always give your reference writer plenty of time. Nothing is worse than a rushed letter. Make sure that asking someone to write you a letter of recommendation and giving them the materials to do so are separate processes. If you aren't sure you can withstand rejection, send an email to your potential reference. A good way to request a reference, even from an old employer or professor, is, Dean Professor Crawford, I was a student in your feminist legal theory class in 2001 at Pace University School of Law. You may remember that I wrote my final paper on Harriet Beecher Stowe. I am currently applying to be a clerk for the Supreme Court, and am wondering if you would feel comfortable writing a reference for me. If the person says yes, then send the forms to him or her. As difficult as it may be to hear, you want to give someone the opportunity to say no to serving as a reference for you. A lukewarm letter is a bad reflection of you for a number of reasons, the most important of which is, didn't she know anyone who could write her a better letter? Is this her best reference? Always provide your reference a copy of the position description for a job or the program description for graduate school and a current copy of your resume. No one can know everything about you, and it's very helpful to have the entire picture. Ask your reference to address specific skills and competences in his or her letter. Dividing responsibilities and references is a very smart strategy. One reference can address not only your great personality, but also your event planning skills. Another can address your super personality, but highlight your counseling and disciplining skills. Thank your reference writer. Always, always, always thank your reference writer. The writer took time to compose a letter for you. You should at the very least return the favor. Similarly, keep your reference writer in the loop. Did you get the job? Get into the program? When you do, write another thank you note.
Now that you have gone over basic information for applications, can you go a little more in depth with obtaining letters of reference? I know you went over the importance of references, but my history is a little shaky, and I'm just not sure how I can get references.
Yes, Lily. As a job seeker, one of your most important assets is your stock of professional references. Both letters and phone recommendations can either elevate your chances of getting hired or drop a good candidate down to a no longer considered pile. It is not only important to have references, but make sure they will portray you in a positive light.
How am I supposed to ask someone if they will speak highly of me? I think if I put them on the spot, they will say yes, but when the employer actually calls them, they will not have great things to say.
You are absolutely right. You want to ask for a recommendation via email or indirect contact. This will allow the potential reference to decline if they are not comfortable. They will most likely not return your email. This is a good thing. You would not want someone to be your reference if they are just not sure about it.
How would I phrase a request for a recommendation?
You could try it this way. Bridget, I plan to begin a quiet job search in the next 2 weeks. Do you feel you know me well enough to provide a reference about my leadership, conflict management, and accounting skills? If the person declines, be thankful. Unless a reference is glowing, you don't want it. Even a lukewarm or I don't really know him very well reference can be damaging.
Like I mentioned before, it has been 3 years since I have spoken to my last employer. I know they liked my performance, and I left on good terms. But what if they are no longer the supervisor?
It is highly recommended to obtain letters of recommendation from colleagues at every position after putting in a 2 weeks' notice, but before leaving a position. If you are consistent, you will have letters of recommendation ready at any time they are needed.
What type of recommendations am I supposed to be asking for? A good employee is a good answer, but are specifics required?
It's okay to be direct with your references. Nicely, of course. Assign each role and allow them plenty of time because nothing is worse than a rushed letter. Ask your supervisor to focus on your leadership skills while a colleague focuses on your teamwork and another colleague focuses on your abilities to meet deadlines. This way, your recommendations can be tailored not only to the type of work you did, but the skills that stood out the most.
So after I have letters of recommendation and list them on my application, I wait until they receive a phone call?
No, it is very important that you keep in touch with your references. Try to provide them with copies of job descriptions for companies that you have applied to and make them aware that they may be receiving a phone call. At this time, try to give some direction as to what they should say. For example, during the interview, the director of HR kept asking me questions about my ability to prioritize tasks. I get the feeling this skill is important to them. When you talk to her, can you work that into your conversation?
That's a good idea. Is there anything else I should do?
As important as keeping your references up to date is during the search, so is thanking them afterwards. Regardless of the outcome, make sure you thank them and keep them informed, especially if they had to produce a letter rather quickly for you. This will encourage them to produce future references for you.
Pre-employment test. Do you never seem to be able to land a job because you do so poorly on those pre-employment personality tests? Despite the horrible ethical implications of using a computer to assess one's personality, companies believe in them and they're not going away anytime soon. Some will argue that there is no right or wrong answer. The test is a way to make sure the potential candidates is the best match for the company. In today's volatile job market, of course there is a right answer, the answer that gets you hired. In this section, you'll learn the ins, outs, and tricks and pitfalls which taking these pre-employment screenings. How to pass a pre-employment test. Please click on the tabs provided to the left to learn more. Step 1. First, you have to realize that the people making a lot of the majority decisions in most companies are way out of touch with reality. Whoever makes the decision to implement personality tests for potential new hires is enticed by the supposed savings and increase in the overall quality of employees and disregards that these tests are extremely flawed for several reasons. Almost any personality test assessment you'll ever take does not apply to the real world in the slightest bit, and we are going to explore why. Step 2. The first type of question you'll encounter is the no-brainer. It's meant to establish that the test taker isn't completely brain dead. A good example of a no-brainer is, I can count to 10, true or false. Obviously, you shouldn't get any of these wrong as long as you are paying attention. The next type of question is slightly more tricky, wherein it gives you multiple outcomes which are equally socially acceptable but tries to establish a personality type. The best thing to remember is that you're trying to establish that you are an outgoing, friendly person. Here are a couple of questions you'll encounter. I like to be in a large crowd. True or false? Although the casual applicant may think that neither of these are undesirable and that there is no wrong answer, the hidden subtext of the question is trying to establish if you're an introvert or extrovert. You, of course, want your prospective employer to think you're an extrovert, so answer true. This type of question may take several forms, so be on the lookout. Here are some more examples of questions like this and the correct answers. I like to be alone. False. I don't mind being the center of attention. True. I like going to big events with large crowds. True. Remember, you have to answer all these questions in a similar manner to score the highest. Step 4. The next type of question tries to establish your work habits. Obviously, it is in your best interest to answer all of these questions in a way that makes you look like a dedicated, effective, hard worker. Most of them are easy, but there are a few that can be tricky. Take the following for example. I work my best under pressure. True or false? Most people will second guess this question and think, well, if I answer true, then they'll expect me to work extra hard. Remember, it's just an assessment. The score is interpreted as a raw number. The individual answers have no bearing on your job placement. The only thing that's important is that the answers are right. Therefore, when a question like this arises, always answer favorably. Here are some examples and the correct answers. I take frequent breaks while working. False. I tend to find more to do when I'm done working. True. I don't need a lot of direct supervision. True. I work best under direct supervision. False. This last one is quite tricky because some people do work well under direct supervision, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to the writers of the test, this question is asking if I'm not consistently under supervision, I will slack off. Step 5. This type of question attempts to establish your aptitude for customer service, leadership, and self-management. These are usually not the deceitful, but there are some to watch out for. Take this question. A customer approaches you who is obviously angry and starts yelling at you. You yell back. The customer is being abusive and disrespectful and must be put in place. Call your supervisor. Smile, calmly apologize to the customer, then ask him what you can do to help the situation. Call the police. These answers represent many actions that an average employee will take. The ideal employee will not overreact and call the police or get into a yelling match with the customer, but will also not go whining to the supervisor with every little problem. The correct thing to do is handle the situation the best you can, and only escalate the problem to the supervisor if it's something you can't resolve. On the other hand, you may run into this type of question. A customer walks up to you and asks to speak to a supervisor. In this instance, the correct answer is get the supervisor. While they want someone who can resolve problems, they also don't want someone who will act like an overconfident jackass and try to step on their toes. Just remember to stay in the frame of mind that you can handle most problems, but if a problem is out of the scope of your job, you are willing to enlist the help of management. Step 6. These questions are meant to assess how likely a prospective candidate is to cause a loss to the company, either by lying, cheating, or stealing. Here are some questions like this, and the questions they're really asking. It's okay to tell someone a small lie to spare his or her feelings. I'm a liar. It's okay to take home supplies you use at work. I'm a thief. If a cashier gave me 5 cents over my correct amount of change and I noticed in the parking lot, I would go back and return the change. I will cheat the company out of money. It's maddening when criminals go free. I don't believe in our justice system. Therefore, by extension, don't believe in company policy if I don't agree with it. I dislike taking orders. I have no sense of respect for authority figures. I've done my share of troublemaking. I'm a delinquent and shouldn't be hired. It's easy to see a pattern emerging here. If you see a question like this, always look for the hidden subtext. Answer accordingly and you'll do fine. Step 7. Sometimes these tests involve a skills assessment that can include simple math or even common sense scenarios. These are almost always presented in a multiple choice format, so that gives you an advantage from the beginning. Remember the few simple rules of multiple choice testing. For math questions, there are usually 3 or 4 egregiously wrong answers and 1 correct one, so doing approximate calculations in your head will save you time. With verbal questions, the longest and/or most complex answer tends to be the correct one. Take the following for example. A quasar is a type of planet, a star, a supermassive, relatively small object located at the farthest reaches of the visible universe that releases more energy than the most powerful active galaxies. A cut of meat. The above example is an over-exaggeration, but you get the idea. The last rule of multiple choice testing is if you truly don't know the answer, just guess. You'll usually have a 20 to 25% chance of getting it right. Step 8. Sometimes these tests present you with various degrees of answers such as strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, and strongly disagree. Treat these like true or false questions. Only answer with either extreme.
Rita, I understand the importance of completing an application accurately and including stellar letters of recommendation, but is there any other reason why I may not be getting a call for an interview?
Well, another pre-screening part of the application process is the pre-employment tests. How are you answering those questions?
What do you mean, how am I answering the questions? They are simple questions like, what grades did I receive in school? Or, do I prefer to work at a fast pace? There's really no right or wrong answer.
Actually, in today's volatile job market, of course there is a right or wrong answer. The right answer gets you hired. If you're interested, I can help you learn the ins, outs, tricks, and pitfalls when taking these pre-employment screenings.
Yeah, I would love that because I always thought I was answering the questions the right way.
There are several types of questions that are asked, and I will go through each one with you. But first you have to realize that people making a lot of the major decisions in most companies are way out of touch with reality. Whoever makes the decision to implement personality tests for potential new hires is enticed by the supposed savings and increase in the overall quality of employees, and disregards that these tests are extremely flawed for several reasons. Almost any personality test you will ever take does not apply to the real world in the slightest bit. I'll try to explain why.
Great. What's the first type of question that I should be aware of?
The first type of question you'll encounter is a no-brainer. It's meant to establish that the test taker isn't completely brain dead. A good example of this type of question is, I can count to 10. Obviously, you shouldn't get any of these answers wrong if you are paying attention.
Yeah, I noticed some questions like that. My favorite is, there are 8 days in a week.
The next type of question is a little trickier because it gives you multiple outcomes which are equally socially acceptable but tries to establish a personality type. The best thing to remember is that you are trying to establish that you are an outgoing, friendly person.
I don't remember seeing any question like that. Can you clarify?
An example of this type of question is, I like to be in a large crowd. Although you may think that there is no right or wrong answer, this hidden subtext of the question is trying to establish if you are an introvert or extrovert. Of course, you want your supervisor to know that you are an extrovert, so you would answer true.
Wow, those are tricky. Can you give me another example?
Sure. Some similar questions may be, I like to be alone. You would answer false. I don't mind being the center of attention. You would answer true. I like going to big events with large crowds. You would answer true.
What else are the employers trying to find out by these questions?
They are also trying to establish your work habits. It is in your best interest to answer all of these questions in a way that makes you look like a dedicated, efficient, hard worker. Most of them are easy, but there are a few that can be tricky. For example, I work best under pressure. When questions like this arise, always answer favorably. Some other examples are, I take frequent breaks while working. You would answer false. I tend to find more to do when I'm done working. You would answer true. I don't need a lot of direct supervision. You would answer true. I work best under direct supervision. You would answer false. This last one is the trickiest because some people actually do work best under supervision, but the question is really asking, if I'm not under direct supervision, I will slack off.
Are there any other types of questions I should be aware of?
Yes, assessments are also attempting to establish your aptitude for customer service, leadership, and self-management. These are usually not that deceitful, but there are some to watch out for. Take this question, for example. A customer approaches you and starts yelling. You yell back to put him in his place, call your supervisor, smile and calmly apologize, then ask what you can do to help, or call the police. These are all actions that an average employee may take. You would not want to call the police and anger the customer even more. You would not want to go to your supervisor with every little customer issue either. The correct response would be to try to handle the situation the best you can and only go to the supervisor if it can't be resolved.
This is good information. I would have thought the supervisor wanted to know about customer issues.
The supervisor needs to be informed, but they have too many things to handle and should not be interrupted for every customer issue. If it can be resolved, tell the supervisor later on when he or she is not busy. Make sure you are telling them for information purposes only and not in a complaining tone of voice.
That makes sense. What about those questions that don't have anything to do with me, like, I know somebody who has stolen something. Everybody knows someone that has stolen something. What does that have to do with me?
Of course, everyone knows somebody who has stolen something. The real question they're asking is, I hang out with thieves. These questions are meant to assess how likely the candidate will lie, cheat, or steal. Here are similar questions. It's okay to tell someone a small lie to spare their feelings. This shows you are a liar. Or it's okay to take home your favorite pen you use at work. This shows you are a thief. If you see a question like this, always think of the hidden subtext and answer correctly.
What do I do about those dreadful math questions? Or the long scenario questions? These are the only questions I actually felt nervous about answering. I thought the rest were easy. I guess I was wrong.
These can appear intimidating, but you already have an advantage because they are usually multiple choice. On most of these questions, there are answers that are obviously way off, so you can start by eliminating those. Then you want to estimate an approximate answer in your head so you do not take up too much time trying to actually solve the problem. This should make it a little easier on you. As for the scenario questions, usually the correct answer is the longest. If you are still unsure about answering these, just go with your best guess. You usually have a 20 to 25% chance of getting it right, and even higher if you've already eliminated some possibilities.
Thanks, Rita. I will pay close attention to the next assessment I complete.
You're welcome. Let me know if you get a call for an interview after using these tips. Here's one last tip. For those questions with various different degrees of answers such as strongly agree, somewhat agree, etc., treat them like true-false questions and only answer then with one extreme or the other, never in between.
Addressing criminal background issues. If you have been convicted of a crime, you may wonder if you will be able to find employment. Employers are becoming increasingly concerned about knowing whether applicants have criminal records. Part of this concern stems from the large jury verdicts that have been rendered against employers for negligently hiring people with criminal history who subsequently caused harm to others while on the job. Another concern for employers relates to whether they will have to disclose a criminal conviction. For example, if a company is trying to raise capital, it may need to make certain disclosures to a bank. Will the company have to disclose that an employee has a criminal conviction for embezzlement or money laundering? Click on the notes to the right to learn more. How much to reveal? Depending on the state, an applicant may not have to reveal any or some types of potentially damaging information, such as arrests not resulting in convictions or convictions for minor manners. Some states have procedures to judicially erase a criminal record. A criminal defense attorney can help determine whether you may be eligible to get a conviction sealed, expunged, or otherwise legally minimized. Conflicting public policies. On the one hand, the public wants to reintegrate into society people with criminal histories, rehabilitated, and gainfully employed. A routine schedule and regular income lessen the likelihood that a person will reoffend, but a person with a criminal record may face prejudices in the job application process. On the other hand, it is important to protect the public from contact with prior offenders who may have propensities to recommit. For example, convicted sex offenders should not work with children or vulnerable adults. Laws of criminal records. The laws about which criminal records an employer must or may access, what an employer may ask a potential employee, and what the job applicant must reveal vary widely from state to state. If you have a criminal record and seek a job, it is in your best interest to consult with an attorney knowledgeable in criminal law and employment law so that you go into the job search fully informed of your rights.
Good afternoon, Cindy. How are you?
I'm okay, I guess.
What's bothering you? I can tell something is wrong.
I just don't think I'll ever find a job.
Why do you think that? You have been trying so hard and taking all the right steps.
I feel like I'm viewed as a bad person because of that stupid little charge on my record 10 years ago when I was 21 in college and had a little too much to drink. That doesn't make me a horrible person.
I understand your frustration, Cindy. A lot of employers are becoming increasingly concerned about hiring people with a criminal background. This stems from large jury verdicts that have been rendered against employers for negligently hiring people with criminal histories who subsequently cause harm to others while on the job.
So they are actually being sued for others' actions.
Yes. Ultimately, it is the employer's responsibility to maintain the safety of everyone. They are also hesitant because they do not want to disclose employees with a criminal record. For example, if a company is trying to raise capital, it may need to make certain disclosures to a bank. A company will not want to disclose that an employee has a criminal conviction for embezzlement or money laundering.
I know I have a criminal record, but don't I still have some rights?
Laws vary from state to state. It is best to consult with an attorney who is knowledgeable in criminal law and employment law so that you go into a job search fully informed of your rights.
Shouldn't opportunities be afforded to people with a prior criminal conviction? I think people have no other choice but to commit another crime such as theft if they are not given the opportunity to work and are homeless and hungry. I know what was done in the past was wrong, but I think everyone deserves a second chance.
You are absolutely right, Cindy. There are conflicting public policies because some want to reintegrate into society people with criminal histories while others are concerned with protecting the public from contact with prior offenders who may have propensities to recommit. For example, convicted sex offenders deserve a second chance but should not work with children or vulnerable adults.
How much am I supposed to reveal on an application? This is where I am being judged, and I would like to at least get an interview by not disclosing.
Depending on the state, an applicant may not have to reveal any or some types of potentially damaging information. This is why it is best to consult with a lawyer. You want to make sure that you do not lie on an application because it is illegal. If you are able to have your record sealed or expunged, you do not have to disclose a criminal background in most cases. You want to pay close attention to the way the question is worded. For example, in the last 5 years, have you been convicted, or have you ever been charged with a felony? For the first question, if you have a charge over 5 years old, your answer is no. For the second question, if you have been charged with 50 misdemeanors, the answer is still no.
Do you know of any employers that hire people with criminal backgrounds?
The best way to start your search is with friends, family, and acquaintances. They will be more likely to take a chance on hiring someone they know, despite a criminal record. Also, try to apply for entry-level or temporary positions at first to build your resume. Don't expect to get hired for your ideal job right away.
Do you have any other tips that can be helpful?
Make sure you are always being truthful. This will show employers are interested in employees they can trust. Understand where the employer is coming from. They might like you as a person, but cannot do anything administratively to get you hired. Investigate employment services. Most states have public agencies that administer programs to help people find employment, sometimes specifically designed for those with criminal histories. Refrain from alcohol and drug use. Some employers require drug testing, especially if they are aware of drug-related offenses.
You said to apply for entry-level positions. What type of entry-level positions should I apply for?
Consider the nature of your past offense. Apply for jobs where the kind of offense is less likely to be an issue of concern. For example, if you have a history of money theft or writing bad checks, you do not want to apply for cashier positions.
When is it appropriate to disclose my criminal history?
Timing is very important when disclosing. There are several appropriate times to disclose your previous conviction to a potential employer. Usually, it is asked directly on the application.
This is where I get frustrated because there is a tiny box to explain your situation.
You can enclose a separate sheet of paper addressing any relevant issues related to the offense you would like to bring to their attention. You can also include details on your cover letter, during the interview, or at the job offer stage. It is never a good idea to wait until you become employed to disclose a conviction. This shows that you are not an honest person.
Thanks, Sylvia. I will try the tips you shared with me and see if there are any changes in the responses.
Tips for workplace reentry. Click on the tabs to learn more. When to disclose a conviction. Timing. Timing is important, and you may have a choice in this. If asked on an application form, you have no choice but to disclose at this point. If the employer requests a CV and covering letter, however, you have full control over what you reveal. On occasions, you may find it advisable not to disclose your conviction initially, but to wait until later in the application process. Sometimes the opposite approach is more useful. There are several appropriate times to disclose your previous conviction to a potential employer. Please click on the menu to the left to learn more. Application forms normally ask questions about convictions. These questions are usually very brief. For example, do you have a previous conviction? There is little chance to elaborate on this on the actual application. Enclose a separate sheet addressing any relevant issues relating to the offense that you would like to bring to their attention. Mark the sheet private and confidential. Refer to the sheet where necessary on the application. If your period of conviction has left significant gaps in your employment history, for instance, you could write on the form unavailable for work due to personal circumstances, which you have elaborated on the extra sheet or accompanying letter. This allows you to keep your application positive. When to disclose a conviction. CV and cover letter. Unlike an application form, you decide the content of your CV. Unless there are inexplicable gaps in your employment history, you may not feel it necessary to raise the issue at this point. It may in fact be worth omitting any information about your conviction, as you may feel it improves your chances of getting an interview, at which stage you have a greater chance to impress them. However, if you decide to let the employer know at this point, use either a separate sheet or covering letter, again emphasizing the positive. Interview. There are a number of reasons for disclosing your conviction at this point. Firstly, by reaching the interview stage, you have met most of the selection criteria and are now only competing against a small percentage of applicants. Secondly, it is often easier within an interview to talk more directly and positively about your conviction. The interviewers will see you as a person with skills and experience, which will help counterbalance any possible negative impressions. It may be worth contacting the interviewer beforehand to let them know that you have something of personal nature to discuss when you meet. This will reduce the chances of them being surprised by the unexpected. It will probably be most appropriate to raise the issue at the point where your previous employment is being discussed. At the job offer stage. Employers often ask about previous convictions at this stage purely as a formality. On the negative side, they may be surprised by your declaration at this point, so you will need to deal with the disclosure as positively as possible. The good news is that you know the employer wants you and may be more inclined to overlook past mistakes. When employed, this is not a good idea, particularly if you have not been honest at an earlier stage. The employer can dismiss you. If you are dismissed, however, for a spent conviction from a non-exempt profession, in which case you were not obligated to declare your conviction and had been employed for more than 2 years, you can claim unfair dismissal. Finding prior employers. If you are unable to remember who you have worked for and/or dates of employment, there are a few remedies that may assist you in your efforts. Obtain an earning report from Social Security. Review copies of tax records from previous years. Contact the company directly, if still in business, and request this information. Consult with family members and friends. If you do remember company names and dates and simply need addresses and phone numbers, the Internet and phone book are great resources.
Hi, Sylvia.
Good afternoon, Gina. How is your job search going?
It's going good, but my resume has not been getting any bites lately.
Maybe you should consider tweaking it.
In what way should I tweak it?
Well, employment history is very important on a resume. This shows stability and a skill set you have acquired. Did you include dates of employment?
I'm having a hard time remembering dates of employment and names of companies. I've been working for the past 30 years. I know I have acquired a lot of skills and I was with certain companies for long periods of time, but I just can't remember.
If you are unable to remember who you have worked for and dates of employments, there are a few remedies that may assist you in your efforts. You can obtain an earnings report from Social Security, review copies of tax records from previous years, contact the company directly if they're still in business, and request information. And you can consult with family members and friends.
Sometimes I just need help with addresses and phone numbers.
You can look the company up in the phone book, or you could search the internet for that information.
Thanks, Sylvia. I'm going to get that information onto my resume immediately to see if it increases my chances of getting an interview.
Follow-up call. After you have put in an application for a job, you will want to make regular contact with the employer until you have a job or the position is filled. One of the best ways of contacting them is by telephone. You should make contact once a week until the position is filled. Identify yourself, identify the position you applied for, be very polite, keep the conversation short. After the application is submitted, call the manager and introduce yourself. Good morning, Miss Goodwitch. Hi, my name is Mary Smith. Say something friendly. How are you this morning? Get down to business. Miss Goodwitch, earlier this week I dropped off an application. I wanted to follow up and see if you received it. Prepare for the unexpected. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you never received it. I was hoping to schedule an appointment to learn more about the career opportunities as a customer service representative in your company. Don't stop. Ask for the interview. Would it be possible for you to spare a few minutes later this week to explore the opportunities with me? Prepare for the put-off. Oh, I do understand that you have a big pile of resumes. A lot of high-quality companies like XYZ Company get a lot of applicants, and that is precisely why I applied. I know you value your employees and always seek out the best. Sell yourself, but don't be pushy and don't beg. I'd like to be the first on your list when you start reviewing the resumes for the position. Would you take a few minutes to meet with me and let me see where my qualifications might fit in? Wrap it up and confirm the date. Excellent. That's Thursday afternoon at 2:30. Thanks so much, Miss Goodwitch. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and for fitting me into your busy schedule.
Thanks for all your help today, Sid. I will try all the tips you shared with me to see if I can land a job sooner. Do you have any other tips you can share with me?
Are you following up after you turn in applications?
What do you mean by follow-up?
After you have put in an application for a job, you will want to make regular contact with the employer until you have a job or the position is filled. This will show you are eager to work and are not just sitting around waiting to hear back from the employer.
What do I say to the employer? I turned in an application and was wondering if you could take a look at it?
You could start the conversation by introducing yourself. For example, good morning, Miss Goodwitch. My name is Gustav. How are you today? Next, you want to get down to business and make the conversation short. Remember, the supervisor is probably busy and you don't want to interrupt their progress at work.
How do I get to that point?
You can say, earlier this week, I dropped off an application and I was calling to see if you have received it. Prepare for the unexpected. She may say she did not receive it. In this case, you would say, I'm sorry to hear that. You never received it? I was hoping to schedule an appointment to learn more about the career opportunities as a customer service rep in your company. Would it be possible for you to spare a few minutes later this week to explore the opportunities with me?
What if she says no?
You have to be prepared for the first put off because a lot of employers will tell you they will call you. This is where you would say something like, I know you're probably busy with a stack of resumes because it is a great company. This is precisely why I applied. Then take a few minutes to sell yourself and tell her about your qualifying skills. You don't want to be too pushy because they will become annoyed. Then you could say something like, I would like to be the first on your list when you start reviewing the resumes. Would you take a few minutes to meet with me to see where my qualifications fit in?
What if she still puts me off?
If she still puts you off, you would at the very least ask permission to call back in a few days. And make sure you thank her very much for taking time out of her day to speak with you. If she invites you for an interview, confirm the time and thank her for taking time out of her busy schedule to meet with you.
Thanks, Sid. I'm usually a shy person. I will give it a try and see if I can land the interview.
If not, it's okay. Just continue to practice follow-up calls and asking for interviews. Eventually, you will feel confident and the employer will be able to hear it in your voice.
To recap, now you have been introduced to the job application process and its many components, as well as learned how to fill out an application effectively. You have acquired some of the tricks and tips to get in the door and how to obtain letters of references. After this course, you will feel confident in addressing criminal background issues, if you have any, and how to locate prior employers, including closing the follow-up calls to secure a job. Good luck!